But as those experiences fade, also the experience is kind of like Teflon or mines, it slips away. Whereas when we have more stressful experiences, the mind is more like Velcro. It kind of sticks and it stays with us longer. So it's important that when we have these moments of presence, that we give them some space, we give them some recognition, we give them some affirmation, not just in ourselves, but also with others. And and we helped those moments to grow. And the five stages on the spiritual path actually comes from a very specific teaching out of Zen or out of Chan, which is the roots of Zen are in Zen Buddhism are in China. And it comes from a teacher named Tozan. Tozan, of course, is the Japanese name. I forget his Chinese name. And it's basically a very nice kind of complete journey of a person's spiritual development. And I'm going to go into that tonight. Tonight, that's going to be kind of the scaffolding or the framework that we're working within. And especially the five ranks of Tozan. It's something that's so easy to kind of grasp. And even though this map, this kind of, it's like climbing to the top of the mountain, getting some type of spiritual, enlightenment or awakening, whatever that is, and then coming back down to the marketplace. It's a really beautiful outward and return journey, the five ranks of Tozan. That journey is actually can be a lifetime journey. And even according to like Buddhism and maybe some other spiritual traditions, it's not just one lifetime, but it's many lifetimes that you go through this. And we're climbing up this mountain lifetime after lifetime. And that's the macro. You can look at it in the bigger picture, but it's also in the micro. So what's really good about this map is that, yeah, see, we could spend the 20, 30, 40 years of some type of awareness practice or relationship to the divine or something, and we will mature through that relationship, through that practice. But this also happens micro. So you can go to a yoga class or an Aikido class or a therapy session and have some type of awakening, you know, just dropping more into your center, more into presence, and then you return home. And you might try to cultivate or sustain or nurture that presence through your daily life. So that's the same thing as this whole map. So even though we're going to look at it in the macro, we're also going to relate to it in the micro, and we're going to specifically look at kind of one or two stages, and then we'll do a little bit of practice with that. And these five stages are kind of based around the two truths doctrine in Buddhism, and the two truths basically tell us that there are two types of truth. The first type of truth is a relative truth. The Buddha said this and Jesus said that. The Jews do this and the Muslims do that. And I have my truth and you have your truth. And who's to say what's really true because it's all relative. And maybe we can have a holy war about what's more true. And but I'm the chosen people and you're not. And whatever, all of this stuff, relatively speaking, from all of these different traditions, if you have a comparative like if you're kind of into seeing the comparisons in cultures, comparisons in religious traditions, you'll kind of understand that they're all talking about the same thing, but looking at it through different lenses. And those different lenses are relative, and that's one type of truth. And the thing about relative truth is that it's relative, it's not absolute. That's the second type of truth, which is the absolute truth. And it doesn't matter if it's Buddhism or Judaism or Hindu or Muslim or Christian or some type of science, like, I don't know, quantum physics, I guess. If it reaches the point that is all inclusive or all empty, then it's an absolute state. And those are both absolute truths. Paradoxically, those are both absolutes. So in the two truth doctrine of relative and absolute, relative truths and absolute truth, we have this beautiful teaching of Tozan, the 5 stages of spiritual development, or the 5 stages on the spiritual path, or sometimes it's called the 5 ranks of Tozan. But the first step is really kind of that first moment that somebody has a spiritual experience, and it could happen young, when we're children, or it could happen later. It could happen when we're children and then we forget about it, and then it can happen again. But it's really that moment when we kind of have a glimpse, a little peek of something that is absolute and or universal. For a period of time, there's a window there, relatively small or longer or shorter, but there's a window there where the separate sense of self relaxes. The separate sense of self fades to the background or recedes to the background. The separate sense of self is no longer dominating your experience, and you're just in pure awareness and merged with the currently arising reality. And that could be experienced as oneness. It could be experienced as emptiness. It can be experienced as unconditional love. It can be experienced as spiritual perfection. There's many different ways it could be experienced. And this is the first stage. It's called the glimpse. The actual translation is seeing the absolute in the relative. So we have our relative life, or I'm over here in Tel Aviv, you're over there in America or Europe or wherever we are, and for you it's like that over here, there. For me, it's like that over here. It's all relative, and then suddenly something happens for some reason, and it's all one, or it's all empty. The absolute has opened up in the middle of a relative life. Often this happens through some type of external conditions. It could be like in spiritual traditions, it could be when you're doing some type of satsang, or you're hanging out or spending time with somebody who is relatively, I should say, comparatively awake, and they're just resonating on some type of high spiritual frequency. And just sitting with that person, him or her, you start to vibrate along there. You start to kind of resonate along their vibrations, and you get some experience. It could also happen through some type of practice. Could you go to a yoga class, or pickleball, or therapy, or aikido, or you go out into nature, go out to the beach, just suddenly you're just in an altered state, which is an expanded state, and the fundamental feeling that it is a more real, a more authentic experience of the moment, because it's not filtered with our narrative mind. It's not filtered with um, all kinds of associations and thoughts, and our translation of what's happening in the moment. It's completely open and free. Now, the reason it's called the glimpse is because it doesn't last. That we have that experience. Oh my God, that was amazing. And then it's gone. And we come home from the weekend seminar or whatever we might have done, and we're really excited about it. It's like, oh my God, we can tell our closest friends. And suddenly I felt very authentic, and I felt free. And all those problems I have in my life were just so small and far away. And you really start to understand, oh my God, there is such a thing as some type of spiritual awakening or spiritual liberation. You have a suddenly in that moment, there's an emotional freedom in the way that you relate with life for a day or 2 days or 3 days, or maybe even a week afterwards, maybe even an hour afterwards or something. But then it does begin to fade away, because we are still very much conditioned by the relative. So stage one is getting that glimpse, and but it disappears. It doesn't last. Or you only get it when you're at the end of the yoga class, or you only get it with a certain company. It could be friends, it could be your sangha, your spiritual community. It could be teachers. It could be just your therapist. It could be somebody who is holding open a certain space, that when you're close to them, you start to resonate. When you're far from them, you kind of go back into the normal sense of self. It's an important stage, but it's still the first stage. Um, but what's so good about this, what's so inspiring about this is that what's so important about this is that it will inspire you to keep opening up to that. And then through that inspiration, you will approach a teacher, a group, somebody who's kind of there in that space. It could be a therapist, it could be a coach, it could be just there's something. It's like, okay, hang on a second. Whatever that was, I know that that's kind of my potential. I want to go back there. I want more of that. You go join a yoga class, or you go do a mindfulness class, or maybe you go on retreat or something like that. But you want to get back into it. And this is stage two. Stage two is when we try to stabilize, access and stabilize the absolute. Stage one is the glimpse. We saw the absolute and the relative. Now we go through the long process of practice to stabilize the absolute. There's in Zen, they have this beautiful saying, when I started meditation, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. Then when I got really advanced in meditation, I started to understand that mountains were no longer mountains and rivers no longer rivers. Well, between those two statements is the practice. And that's what stage two is all about. You start to have some type of practice or discipline or attitude or relationship, or you go out to nature more, or what are you do your yoga class, you do your there's something you take on that will help you to stabilize that practice, that experience through practice. So what I was getting first from an external condition, usually a person, but it could have been circumstances. Now I'm taking on practices that help me get that taste, or help me open up to that more absolute perspective through my own efforts, through my own practices. And that's stage two. That's kind of, I'm guessing that that's at least, remember I said this is macro and it's also micro. We're all in this stage. We're all practitioners. One thing that's the same about every single person in this call is that we're practicing something somehow, more or less, consistently, or from time to time. It doesn't matter. We've all kind of got that. So then we take on the second stage of stabilizing the absolute. And what's really important is in this stage, every moment that you have of some type of universal experience or some type of relaxed activity of my I'm kind of cautious to use the word ego, but my sense of self, somehow it relaxes a little bit, and I'm go more from the doing mode more into the being mode. That's what this stage is all about. And it's very, very important that we recognize when it happens. Um, they say that our minds are Teflon for these experiences of the absolute. Whenever you have some type of unity consciousness or some type of just expanded sense of self or presence, where the mind is just calming down, we all know that it's such a sweet, wonderful experience. Very little problems. Even when there's problems, they're not that big of a problems. But as those experiences fade, also the experience is kind of like Teflon. Our minds just slips away. Whereas when we have more stressful experiences, the mind is more like Velcro. It kind of sticks and it stays with us longer. So it's important that when we have these moments of presence, that we give them some space, we give them some recognition, we give them some affirmation, not just in ourselves, but also with others. And we help those moments to grow. Like I often talk about my dear friend and I also teacher, Diane Hamilton. She was the first. I had a lot of teachers in my life, mostly men teachers. Some of them were a few women teachers, but like the ones that I was really going to I'm talking about after my education, like Aikido and meditation and therapy and stuff like that. I was more drawn to men, kind of father figures. And then I was drawn to Diane at a certain point in my life. I was into my 40s. And she had she had this way of praising me. And it was very embarrassing on one level, but on another level, it's so nourishing and nurturing. And I asked her about it one time. She said, "Yeah, when you recognize something, it grows." And now as a father with my kids, I realize, yeah, you've got to give the positive feedback, and that positive trait will just kind of grow more and more. So it's kind of the same thing with this. Whenever we recognize these moments, that we're in these moments, give it a little bit of space because it is the moment will slide away like Teflon. So have a little practice to recognize when you have some moment in the absolute. I often give this poem of Rumi, where he says, "When you feel your lips becoming infinite and sweet like the moon in the sky." In those moments where everything's just perfect, your lips are infinite and sweet like the moon in the sky. You feel that spaciousness inside. You will know that Shams of Tabriz is there too. And Shams was, of course, Rumi's teacher, I guess you would say. And he only met him for a short period of time, and then Shams was gone. But every time Rumi would go into deep meditation, have some spiritual experience, he knew that he was meeting Shams. And he would sit down, he'd write love poems to Shams, to this teacher. He was recognizing the absolute. And in this stage, it's super important that we give it some recognition so it cultivates and grows. And we're going to do some practices about this tonight. Stage 3, 4, and 5, I'll just touch on briefly. Um, 3, if you imagine you're climbing a mountain, and stage 3 is actually when you're resting in the absolute, where you have some type of awakening experience or the practice reaches a level of maturity where it doesn't slip back down anymore. We all know what it's like to have a practice. Could be Aikido, could be meditation, could be therapy, could be yoga, whatever. And maybe we have periods where we're really disciplined and we go and we see the benefit, or healthy diet or something like that. We see the benefits of it. And then other times our life is just, we just get really busy, or we're not able to do it, or we just kind of fall off the wagon a little bit. And then we see those benefits slipping away. Or maybe we realize, oh my God, I'm out of shape, or whatever it is, or I'm more stressed than I used to be. That's the slipping back. At a certain point in our practice, you'll reach that third stage, which is when you're resting in the absolute. And it's like climbing a mountain. You get to the top of the mountain, there's no more slipping down, and you're up there at the very peak, resting in the absolute. We had the glimpse of the absolute. We had those practices that helps us to stabilize the absolute, which carried us to the top of the mountain. Now we're resting in the absolute. What needed to be done is done. There's a certain maturity where things just don't fall back anymore. You'll still have, a sense of self. You'll still have some conditioning. There's still the ego. There might be some shadow work to clean up. There might be some things that, we still practice. But in terms of accessing the absolute, kind of whenever you need to, or whenever you have the intention to, it's kind of there for you. And that's stage 3, resting in the absolute. And it's like sitting at the top of the mountain. All the problems down in the bottom of the mountain, and the cities and the villages that are far, far away. You're sitting up in the pristine, clear nature, sky, you and the stars. But that's only stage 3. It's kind of a classic idea of enlightenment, but it's only stage 3 in the spiritual path. Stage 4 is returning, coming back down the mountain. And that's the macro. So if you relate to this in the micro, you come out of Aikido class and you're just, wow, that was amazing. You come out of yoga class, it's like, wow, you're just ready to take on the day. Or you come out of therapy, a good session, or maybe catharsis, and suddenly something clicked and integrated, and whoa, you have a certain emotional freedom in the way you relate to the world, or in meditation. But you know that to continue your journey, you have to go the journey from the relative to the absolute needs to be reversed. Now you need to make the journey from the absolute back to the relative, back to the daily life. After enlightenment, the laundry. And that stage is called seeing the absolute in the relative. Stage 1 was seeing the relative in the absolute. Now it's seeing the absolute in the relative. How can I bring that open-minded freedom that I experience in those moments back into, the stress and messiness of my daily life? Oh my God. it's a whole nother practice. You thought climbing the mountain was hard. Returning is like even harder, especially when there's some maybe some cleaning up, some let's say relational cleaning up or psychological cleaning up, or you might need to do therapy, or you might want to go and make amends or something, or but it's all about bringing this kind of what we know is more authentic and true for us. It's like bringing that back into the relative world. And it's a whole nother practice. And again, if we look at this as macro, the big kind of lifelong journey, it could be years doing that. If we look at micro, it's good to remind myself when my kids are like driving me nuts, remind myself, hang on, I'm a meditation teacher. I can bring a little bit of space to this. Because if I forget that, I'm just like, rah. So that's that whole fourth stage in the journey is to bring that absolute, or bring some universal perspective back into the particular, or bring the absolute back into the relative. And stage five, and this is going to be the end of my talk. Stage five is when the absolute and the relative are one. There's no difference anymore between the absolute and the relative. It's just all one continuous field of experience. And as I said in Zen, they started the journey. When I started my meditation, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. Then, when I reached the top of the mountain, that third stage where I was resting in the absolute, mountains were no longer mountains and rivers were no longer rivers. Miles was no longer Miles. Amy was no longer Amy. We are just in a field of oneness. It's all one, absolute. When I started my meditation, mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers. When I realized this third stage, whatever we're going to call it, mountains were no longer mountains and rivers were no longer rivers. Stage five, where absolute and relative are one, mountains are mountains again and rivers are rivers again. It's all back to, but it's all back, but it's not as it was when we started. So does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, as I said before, this kind of model, or this map of the five ranks of Tosan, is such a sweet map, and kind of relatable, even though maybe in our life, well, I don't know if I've even been at the top of the mountain or this return path, or it sounds like advanced to me or whatever. But I think we can relate to it in the micro. Well, yeah, I did. I just did a week retreat and I came back and I was kind of floating through my daily routine for a week, and it was like there's a lot of freedom, before the stress started coming back. We can relate to it in a macro sense. Excuse me, in a micro sense. So what I thought would be good for us is to kind of look at the first two stages, because that first two stages, even though I think we're all well on the path, the more that we give attention to that, the more foundation, the more stable our practice foundation is. What I want to do is share with your friends, your cohort, any type of that first stage where you had some type of, looking back in your life, where you had some type of glimpse, and this could be like, it could be, the first love, or it could be the second love, the third love. Well, it could happen in love, it could happen with children, it could happen in just an experience. I've told this story many times, but I won't go into the whole thing. But I had some experience when I was a 3-year-old boy sitting on the front porch of my house in Farmers Branch, Texas, back in 1966, that I never forgot. And it was suddenly, I just had this kind of, I don't know what it was, opening. And it was unfiltered reality, non-conceptual reality. And I don't know, maybe it lasted 10 minutes or something. I don't know. But it just stayed with me as a reference point. I slipped out of it, and then I went through my life, and looking back, I realized a lot of the things that I was doing in my life was to get back there. But I never forgot that glimpse of some type of unity consciousness as a child. Maybe I was 4, I don't know. But maybe you have something like that, or maybe you did a workshop or a weekend somewhere and you came back and it was like that. What is your experience of this kind of first stage, of where you get this glimpse to something greater? Okay, that inspired you to to do spiritual work or personal development work. Okay, is that clear? What is this first stage? Is these some moments in your life where you had some opening and you saw the absolute in the relative. Have a great breakout. So welcome back, everybody. How was your breakout? Yeah. Is there anybody want to share something? Is there anything that anybody would like to share about you or about what came up in the group?
I'll
Um,
share something.
yeah, sure. Who is that? Linda?
Uh, Linda, yeah.
Hey, Linda.
Hi, everyone. It was really, it was beautiful to me how, and striking to me, not surprising, but striking to me how there were such similarities, how we were all sort of on a theme, and it was striking also that hearing the other two people speak brought up memories for me
Hmm.
about similar experiences in very different places on the planet, and yet similar experiences at different ages. And so I think that just that sharing really inspired me too. So, and there were similarities. So it was really quite beautiful.
That is
So,
beautiful. And it's interesting because we're talking about like the first stage, this kind of glimpse, but the sharing process that we're doing, this kind of reflecting, we're actually kind of awareness, we're putting mindfulness in the middle of the reflection. That's actually that second stage where we're stabilizing a certain way that we relate and hold space with each other. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you for
yes.
demonstrating. Would anybody else like to share something that came up?
Yeah,
Like,
it's just amazing that we are children and so close to it. I was sharing an experience when I was a child. It had to do with sound. In this moment, I felt that time doesn't exist, that
mm,
everything is, this sound is something I heard in the past, and I will experience it in the future. And I was about 8 years, and I was so sure about it that this is something. I felt something sort of. In infinity, or
mm,
in infinity,
timeless.
timeless, yeah, right, timeless. And wow, that's so amazing that we children are so wise already and so
Yeah.
close to it. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah. Thank you, Gerlinda. Yeah, yeah, this experience, I mean, there's so many different ways we could talk about this absolute or some type of unity experience, but there are a few things that are a few qualities that are universal there. And one is there's a sense of timelessness, like your Linda was just saying, or we could also say spacelessness. Um, there is a sense of effortlessness. It's just kind of free and easy. And there's a sense of selflessness that all of my self concerns and self-conscious stuff and the thoughts and the boundaries and the fears and the desires and all this stuff is just relaxed in those moments. And they're so simple and easy and straightforward, but they're also precious, precious moments and precious gifts. So great. So like I was saying to, I think it was Linda before, that the way that we're sharing about this, the way that we're kind of holding this is we're actually putting the very thing we're talking about, we're putting it in the middle of our meeting here. And that's a practice. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to just do a very simple practice. And maybe I can have a couple of volunteers. If anybody'd like to raise your hand. Mhm. Okay, who is that? Michelle? Great. Michelle, you can open your mic. I need one more if somebody would like to. Okay, great. Sorry, I think Angelina, excuse me. Angelina had her hand up and then Michelle. Okay, so what we're going to do is very simple. It's just a mindfulness in the moment, sentence completion, what we're mindful of in this moment. And it could be incredibly mundane, or it could be something that's happening within us, or it could be something that's happening between us. It doesn't matter. Um, I'll start and I'll just say, the sentence is in this moment, I am mindful of. You could also say, I'm aware of, I am present of, I am feeling, whatever works best for you. And then so we'll go Miles, Michelle, Angelina, and then Miles, Michelle, Angelina, like that. We'll go in a circle. So in this moment, I'm mindful that I'm a little bit in my head, thought processes.
In this moment, I'm mindful I have a little fear.
In this moment, I'm mindful of some opening in my heart region.
In this moment, I'm mindful of a little bit of like, I don't know, energy, just relaxing it through here, through the shoulders.
In this moment, I feel joy in my heart, deep within the fear.
In this moment, I'm mindful of my lips going into an inner smile.
Yeah, in this moment, I'm also mindful of happy to share that with you both. Sorry.
In this moment, I'm aware that the smiling is contagious.
In this moment, I'm aware of some feelings behind my eyes and a mixture of happiness and sadness.
In this moment, I'm mindful of more space inside of me in this area here.
In this moment, I'm aware that there are many squares with many faces. And in this moment, oh, I said it twice. I want to share that I've got a salt lamp in front of me, and it's really beautiful. So in this moment, I want to share the salt lamp, which looks beautiful.
In this moment, there's the echo of listening and more space in the heart region.
So thank you, Angelina, and thank you, Michelle, for modeling that with me. You might find in your own process when you're doing this exercise, it's a little bit like a yo-yo. Suddenly something will be a little bit deeper or more expanded. And the next round, you suddenly something get self-conscious or whatever, get contracted, and it's fine. Everything is fine. Awareness is in the middle, and whatever's happening is what's happening. This is just one simple practice that we're going to do together for that second stage of stabilizing the absolute, or stabilizing, let's just say, awareness. Okay. All right, great. So let's go, everybody. I'll give you about, let's say about another 8 minutes for this one, and then we'll see you back here when you're done. Okay, everybody, how was your breakout? Yes, Philip.
Yeah, we had an interesting moment, at least for me, that I do keep kind of awareness of what I'm feeling even as the turn goes around. So I was like, we were randomly sharing things, and I was thinking about the throat, which was not really connected to anything before, and the other two people also kind of shared not the same, but different experience in the similar area. So that was really, really interesting.
So
But
I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying that you were having you noticed that everybody was having similar physical experiences?
different, but in the same area. So that was like I was thinking before that okay, this area, and then yeah, because we had like really random sharing. It was hard to guess what will be the next, because it was feelings, it was parts of the body, sensations, everything. And then at one moment we kind of came to the same
Oh, great.
area, which was really, really interesting.
And then when it came to the same kind of similar experience, did it also pass away? Did it change again in the next few moments?
Yeah, afterwards it changed afterwards.
Yeah, great. I mean, like I was saying before, we can feel like a yo-yo where we get deep in and then we a little bit more shallow, deep in and a little bit more shallow. That can be individually, and it can be like sometimes like popcorn around the circle. But there can also be moments where the whole group just drops in and drops into a place that's, anyways, that glimpse that we were talking about before. And it's quite unique. And it's as beautiful and as wonderful and satisfying as an experience it is to have by ourselves. It just gets multiplied when we have it with another person. It's so simple, so in the moment, and nothing to do. No, really, it's all perfect. Yes, two hands came up. So let's go to Julia and then we'll go to Guy.
Probably were going to say a similar thing because we were in the same group.
All right.
We had kind of a moment of
I have to tell you, both your hands came up at the same time.
of peaceful joy together. I don't know. It was like just being with each other and being at peace and being in this moment at peace. And it was good.
Oh, nice. Guy?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would be strange if I said anything different now, wouldn't it? But that was exactly that. And the interesting thing was that the subject was how we were feeling the same thing. So we were feeling the same thing, and the subject that we started talking about or being mindful of was that we were feeling the same thing. So we were feeling together with a feeling of togetherness, if you like, which had a certain simplicity to it. And yeah.
Nice.
Like having a cup of tea and sitting in the evening and not saying much and being content with the moment with each other. It's like it felt. I mean, we did not have any tea, but like this atmosphere.
Actually, I had tea as well, but never mind.
Yeah, Guy's in Bali, so I think it's what, 3 a.m. for you guys, something like that.
Or
Okay. All right. Amy, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. It was amazing with our group is that we did go deeper and just felt as if we were in that oneness. And when it was time to leave, we both felt like, we all kind of like didn't want to leave. It was that is amazing connection.
Yes, Michelle.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. What I've gotten out of it is the word connection for me, because as I go to really think about how I can impress what I'm seeing in the present moment, I'm not embodied within myself. So when I go to an idea, I'm not in my body, so I'm in my head.
That's right.
When I'm present with another person and when I'm really listening, then I have more spaciousness, more relaxation, and then I soften. When I don't soften, I'm not present and I can't relate to another person. So what I've gotten out of this is a feeling of the word is is connection. To connect with another person is what I felt most important from this exercise for myself.
Yeah, beautiful. That's great, Michelle. And our ability to connect with another person is kind of maybe equal or kind of equal to our ability to connect with ourselves. So, if I'm stressed and busy and whatever, overwhelmed with whatever's going on in my daily life, it's going to be hard for me to connect with other people outside of that. But when I can stop, and this is really just mindfulness practice now, when I can stop and let that kind of settle down like a little snow globe, you stop shaking it, you put it down, it's going to settle. But we tend to agitate it and get agitated by things a lot. But as that settles down, it gives that clarity or openness or expansiveness or in the present moment. And from there, we can actually really connect with others. So it's very good practice to have others that we can connect with, but we also have to learn how to do it on our own. So, like everything else, it's solo and it's individual and it's also collective.
Sorry, Miles, this second stage
Yes.
of affirming and recognizing, it's so lovely to know that is actually a spiritual stage of development, because that is something I thought was a need one had in one's psychological development, to be heard and seen and to tell one's story. And that sort of allows it to arrive a bit more deeper within oneself.
Yeah,
and
sure.
also to recognize the fact that it's valid, that your experience is valid. We actually need someone else to hear it. That's the effect it had on me.
Yeah, and That's what simple mindfulness is. Whatever's arising in the present moment is valid, like you said. And it
Yeah.
needs to be validated. Now, certain things we don't want to, if there's some behavior that's disruptive, and I mean, we can still validate it, but put a boundary around it, Validating in that case would mean, look, I understand maybe what that person's going through, but it should be boundaried. So
Yeah.
there's a no, but there's also a yes. But
Yes.
generally speaking, for like these groups and these meetings, it's validate, validate, validate.
Yes, but validating these unusual glimpses is what I was meaning. That you don't feel like you're alien or talking a foreign language. To have that heard is really quite something.
Which is beautiful because society, mainstream society, doesn't really validate that. And this is not
Yeah.
a judgment or accusation or anything like that. It's just,
Yeah.
mainstream society, we're validating other stuff that's some type of social skill, depending on wherever you might be.
Yeah.
But yeah, these things don't often get
Yeah.
validated.
Anyway,
And
thank you so
like,
much.
yeah, like I was saying before, when we
Yeah.
recognize them,
Yes,
they grow. They just
that's right.
they
That's
they
right.
they begin
Yeah.
to bloom like a flower that's getting nourished.
Yes, yes. And it's lovely to hear you say that that's one way of cultivating it,
Absolutely.
and allowing it to grow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to
Thank
see you,
you.
Patricia.
And you too, Miles.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Okay, everybody. So with that, I want to thank you all. Oh, I'm going to finish with a poem from T.S. Eliot. Remember the 5 stages, seeing the absolute and the relative. Stage 2, stabilizing the absolute and the relative. Stage 3, resting in the absolute. Stage 4, seeing the relative in the absolute. We're kind of bringing back in life. And stage 5 is when absolute and relative are one. And this was perhaps best expressed by T.S. Eliot when he said, "We shall not cease from our exploration. And at the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time." So thank you all for joining me this evening, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.